Today I'd like to discuss a process that many filmmakers take on in their career at some point. I'd like to talk about no-budget filmmaking. Making a movie without any funding presents a ton of obstacles and hurdles, but with the right amount of preparation and strategy, you can still put out something that's well-made and meaningful. Today, I'm going to take you through my step-by-step process from pre-production to post-production that I've developed and optimized over the last 3 years for making films with a $0 budget. A quick disclaimer though, this process assumes that you already have or have access to all the basic equipment necessary to shoot your film. Even with low budget gear, there's a pretty significant expense involved, so we have to assume that you've already made that investment or know some crew who can bring that gear to the table. So, now that you've got your basic gear, let's dive in.
Step 1. Conceptualization.
I cannot stress enough how absolutely vital the pre-production process is to successfully making a no-budget film. Planning and strategizing is the most important aspect of making this whole thing possible in the first place. First, you need an idea. When you're brainstorming for a basic idea or concept, aim to keep your locations to an absolute minimum. This is really important. One single location is ideal. But if you have to have more for story purposes, I would not exceed 3 when you have no money. Having beautiful, interesting locations are going to be really important for adding that really precious production value to your film. Without the money for an art department and set dressing, you're going to have to choose locations that really add value to your film without needing a whole lot of modifications. I suggest choosing a story concept completely based around the location that you have in mind. To give you an example, I grew up working on this huge sheep farm, so whenever I'm writing a new screenplay, I try and pick something that can take advantage of the buildings, the fields, and all the wooded areas that the farm provides. Think long and hard about all your connections, and then make a list of the potential locations that you have access to for free. If there's a great location you want that is kind of playing hard to get, maybe they want some money, consider wagering a short promotional video for the location in exchange for some shooting time. When brainstorming ideas, also be sure to keep your characters to an absolute minimum. 1 to 2 actors is ideal. You're going to want really strong performances to add production value to your no-budget film to make it stand out, so it's really important to keep your needs to a minimum. There's so much you can do with even just 1 actor, so get creative.
Step 2. The treatment.
Now it's time to get your concept on paper. I suggest starting with a treatment. If you haven't heard of it, a treatment is essentially a play-by-play of your script, without the proper formatting and the dialogue necessary of a proper screenplay. Think of it like a quick pitch of your film. You can send this to potential cast and crew to gauge interest, and then see what you have to work with. Not everyone is going to read a full-length screenplay, but most people will give you a few minutes of their time to check out a treatment.
Step 3. Writing.
Now it's time to write the screenplay itself. This is where the formatting is key. With no budget, it's really important to be as buttoned up and polished as possible when it comes to your writing. Otherwise, nobody's going to take you seriously. And without any money, you already run that risk to begin with. So, you'll need to use script writing software. It'll take care of all the formatting for you, so you can just focus on being creative. I recommend going with Writer Duet. Your first script is free, and it's really easy to export a PDF copy for sharing with your cast and crew. If you decide you like it, you can write unlimited screenplays for a pretty low monthly price. I typically subscribe to Writer Duet only when I'm writing. Most of the year, I'm in production or post-production for my projects, so I tend to only pay for Writer Duet when I'm using it, which is only a couple times a year. Fortunately, you can cancel and renew anytime, just like with Netflix. Check the description for a link to the website. Now back to the writing. Okay, Shakespeare once said, "Brevity is the soul of wit." This is highly applicable to screenwriting, especially when you're working with no budget and you have limited time. Try and keep your screenplay really short. Get it all on paper and then go through several rounds of revisions where you eliminate superfluous dialogue and little bits that just don't add value. Don't be afraid to be heavy-handed with the cuts. If you're interested in submitting to festivals, the shorter your film, the more forgiving judges will be of your low budget. 8 to 12 minutes, based on my research, seems to be the sweet spot for festival shorts. If you can tell a compelling story in less than that, you've got a great chance of getting into at least 1 film festival.
Step 4. Visualization.
Okay, now that your screenplay is written, it's time to start thinking about what you want your story to look like. If you're collaborating with other creatives at this point, you may want to consider putting together a lookbook, and then maybe even a storyboard. A lookbook can be as simple or as complex as you'd like it to be. It's just a collection of visual references that kind of illustrate the vision you have for your film's aesthetics. It can be a collection of stills that illustrate shots you like. It could be colors you'd like to emulate. It could have lighting references, costume ideas, whatever you want, really. The more reference images you compile, the better you'll be able to convey your vision in the end. I recommend using a combination of Google Images and screen grabs from films you like. Next, you can move on to the storyboard. Now, you don't have to be an artist to make this work. You don't need to know how to draw, anything like that. Simplicity works just fine. It could be stick figures or even fully fleshed out, rendered, colored sketches. In essence, you're just creating a frame for every shot of your film. Almost think of it like a comic book strip. But you also have arrows and text that indicate some of the camera movement in your film. This can be a really good way to help visualize what your film is going to look like in its final format. Feel free to do it the old-fashioned way with paper and pencil, but if you want to go the software route, I recommend downloading Storyboarder. It's a free piece of software that lets you draw digitally or scan in your paper drawings. Check the description for a link if you want to give it a go.
Step 5, the shot list.
Okay, now that your screenplay is written and maybe you've put together a lookbook and a storyboard, it's time to plan out your shot list. Your shot list is a spreadsheet of every single camera angle you plan to get on set to capture everything you need for your film. I recommend using software like Microsoft Excel or Apple Numbers to put this together. Here's what my typical first draft shot list looks like. In separate columns, I list the angle, the camera rig, the camera movement, the actions of the subject, and any miscellaneous notes that are going to aid me on set. I suggest going through your script chronologically when you put together the first draft. Make sure each scene contains at least one master shot. A master shot covers the entirety of a scene without the need for any supplementary additional shots. In an emergency situation, a master could cover the entirety of a scene in the edit. I'll explain in even more detail why masters are vital when we get to the production section, so stick with me.
Step 6, casting.
Now that you've got your film written and visualized, I recommend you begin the casting process. Honestly, this is one of my favorite parts, so enjoy it. You're gonna need to know who you're working with and what their availabilities are like before you put together a shooting schedule. I like to post casting calls on as many local email lists and Facebook groups as possible. I also like using Backstage.com a lot. There's a small fee to post on Backstage, but I've always been able to Google around and I always find a 50% off promotional code. This gets your posting down to about $13 and it lets you open up your casting opportunities to a huge geography of talent. I mean, you can make it international if you want. Once a few submissions have caught your eye, it's time to hold those auditions. I recommend providing your actors with sides and then they can send you a self-taped audition. If you don't know what sides are, they're just a snippet of your script that actors will be performing for the audition. Now, I definitely recommend you choose sides that force the actor to showcase their versatility and a range of emotions. Give them a challenge so you can really see what they can do. If you decide to hold in-person auditions like I typically do, I recommend checking in with your local library to see if you can rent a room for a few hours. Luckily for me, my library offers this perk for free as long as I request a room a few weeks in advance. So go ahead and check with yours.
Step 7, scheduling.
Okay, now that you've cast your talent, it's time to get everyone's schedules. This is the not so fun part of pre-production, so I'm gonna try and make it as easy for you as possible. You're gonna need to have an estimation of how many days it's going to take to make your film. This will allow you to propose some potential shoot dates. There's a website called whenisgood.net that I recommend using for figuring out everyone's availability. They basically check off certain days that work for them, and then what you can do is see where everybody kind of lines up and then pick your shoot dates from there.
Step 8, the production shot list.
This is probably the most important part of the planning process because it's vital that you optimize your shooting schedule so that it's as efficient as possible. Figure out how many hours you have available with your actors on the shoot dates and begin listing out the shots in the exact order you plan to shoot them on set. 99% of the time, you won't be shooting your script chronologically. You'll be jumping all over the place story-wise to make the best use of everyone's availability. At each location, prioritize your shots first and foremost based on actor availability. For example, if you know you have a scene in your schedule that requires actors A and B, but you only have actor B for 2 hours that day, you're definitely gonna wanna shoot the scene with actor B first so that you take advantage of their limited availability. The last thing you want is you go to shoot their scene and they have to go. Next, prioritize your shots based on their importance to covering the scene itself. A million things can go wrong on set, and time that may have seemed like plenty can quickly turn into precious time before you know it. This is where the master shots we discussed earlier come in handy. Prioritize shooting the master shots of your scenes before the supplementary angles. The masters are going to be your wider shots that cover the entire scene, and in an emergency, while definitely not ideal, they could work without any other shots. This is your insurance, so make sure you get them. After the masters are done, you're going to shoot your supplementary angles. These will be your 50-50s, your over the shoulders, close-ups, inserts, those types of angles. You'll repeat this prioritization process for each scene in your shooting schedule. If you do this right, you'll be able to focus on camera work and directing rather than spending precious time on logistics during production. You're also going to want to minimize the amount of camera and lighting setups that you have to do on set. Every time you move the camera to a different angle, you have to spend precious time setting up gear and possibly even relighting the scene entirely. So once you have your master done, try and get everything you need from one side of your set before moving on to the other. Avoid getting a shot, moving the camera across the room, moving back. It's just a waste of time. Instead, get the 2 shots you need from side A, then move to side B to get your final shot. It's also worth noting that some B-roll and establishing shots that don't require your talent and crew should definitely be shot on your own time without the pressure of a ticking clock.
Step 9. Rehearsals.
I cannot emphasize enough how vital it is to rehearse with your actors as much as possible before you shoot. On a no-budget production, you're almost definitely working with non-union actors who may not have a ton of experience. So it's important to invest a lot of time into crafting the performances you're looking for. See if you can schedule rehearsals with your actors at your home if you have the appropriate space. If people's availabilities are all over the place, meet with everybody individually and you could read for their scene partner. I recommend scheduling a minimum of 3 rehearsals. It's really important that you split the work up into multiple sessions so that your actors can go home, kind of reflect on your direction, and then come back to you with what they've developed. Get the rehearsals on camera if you can. This lets you screen test some of your angles, and you can also email the rehearsals to the actors so they can study their performance alongside your notes. If you're going to capture the performances you envision, you and your talent really have to be a well-oiled machine by the time you get to production. So invest as much time as possible ahead of time rehearsing.
Step 10. Call sheets.
Once your production shot list is complete, you'll know when and where the actors and crew are needed. Call sheets are a day-to-day schedule for cast and crew. It lets them know what time they have to arrive on set and when their scenes will start rolling. When you're not paying people, you really want to avoid having anybody idly waiting around. Respect people's time and use it as efficiently as possible. So plan to get people on set and working ASAP, then release them as soon as they're no longer needed. A call sheet can be a PDF or even just a simple email that you send out to actors.
Step 11. Post-production.
Okay, now that production is complete, congratulations by the way, and you've hopefully used steps 1 through 10 to ensure relatively smooth shoots, it's time to move on to post-production. Without a budget, you're going to be tackling this entire process by yourself, or maybe with the help of a few volunteer friends. This is where YouTube is your best friend. If you're not familiar with a certain step in the editing workflow, say color grading for example, there's no excuse why you can't learn it yourself. There are infinite free resources available on the internet that can teach you literally anything you need to know about using your editing software. You're not going to become an expert overnight, but you may learn just enough to achieve great results for your film. I edit using Adobe Premiere, but as a no-budget option, I recommend going with DaVinci Resolve. While I haven't used it myself, it's quickly becoming one of the most popular NLEs out there today. And best of all, it's free. And its color grading abilities are undisputedly best in class. So give it a try. Check the link in the description if you want to check it out.
Step 12. Distribution.
Once you feel that your film is in the best shape possible, it's time to lock that edit, render it out, and decide how you want to distribute it. We're very fortunate these days to be able to self-publish our films on platforms like YouTube, Vimeo, and Amazon. While Vimeo tends to be kinder to your videos in terms of compressing the quality, you have to pay for upload space, so it's not as budget-friendly as YouTube. With YouTube, uploading is of course free and unlimited, but here's the downside. YouTube's compression codec tends to be very, very heavy-handed. Basically, this means that it's going to reduce the quality of your film significantly based on the upload. There are several ways to minimize this, so listen very closely. These are really important to uploading to YouTube. First, you want to upload your film in at least 4K resolution. YouTube uses a completely different codec to compress 4K videos than it does for 1080p videos. It essentially values 4K content more than 1080p content, so it's going to be a lot kinder to higher resolution footage when it comes time to compress. Even if your film wasn't shot natively in 4K, render it out in 4K. Trust me, it's going to look so much better on YouTube. The second workaround is to make sure your film is rendered out in 100 megabytes per second. This is your film's bitrate. This may sound like overkill and it's going to result in a higher file size, but again, we want to overcompensate in quality so that YouTube's heavy-handed compression algorithm has much less of an effect on our final product. Things get quite technical when it comes to rendering and uploading, so if you want to see more of a comprehensive video on the settings I use to optimize my videos for YouTube, go ahead and let me know below in the comments. If you decide you want to submit your film to festivals, keep that YouTube or Vimeo link unlisted. Many festivals don't accept films that are already published, so this is really important. Your one-stop shop for the festival circuit is filmfreeway.com. Most festivals have early bird deadlines where you can enter at a significantly reduced fee, usually around $30 per entry. So aim to hit those early bird deadlines, or submissions are going to get pretty expensive quick depending on how many you want to enter. One website that I absolutely recommend that every filmmaker submit to is filmshortage.com. Film Shortage is a site dedicated to showcasing quality indie short films. For only $14.99, you have the chance of being featured on their website, but here's where it's more important. You'll get some very honest feedback that you likely won't get from friends and family. Just remember, it's not the end-all be-all, but I really value their feedback, and I think you will too. So there you have it, my complete step-by-step guide on how to make a no-budget film. If you have any ideas for future content, or there's anything specific you'd like me to cover on the channel, go ahead and let me know below in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you for the privilege of your time. I know the internet's a pretty busy place these days, so I really appreciate you stopping by my channel. Until next time, conceptualize, create, conquer.